me, sales is a combination of having your network, presenting your network, combining your network, letting them know each other, combining that with your knowledge, with your perspective on the world. And to me, that's what makes this whole industry so super exciting and interesting.
Welcome to the Making Sales Social podcast, featuring the top voices in sales, marketing, and business. Join Bryn Tillman and me, Bob Woods, as we each bring you the best tips and strategies our guests are teaching their clients, so you can leverage them for your own virtual and social selling. Enjoy the show.
Welcome back to Making Sales Social. I'm Bryn Tillman, and I am excited to be here today with my guest, Martijn Holtes. He specializes in helping professionals and aspiring thought leaders in the B2B service industry and consultative selling fields to amplify their impact through the power of social and knowledge capital. I love that, knowledge capital. That's better than thought leadership, I think. That's awesome. He teaches how to leverage your social capital for meaningful connections, strategic partnerships, and new business opportunities. Martijn also shares his expertise on developing your knowledge capital, teaching you how to turn your unique insights into compelling content that showcases your expertise and establishes you as a go-to authority. Martijn, welcome to Making Sales Social. We're excited to have you here today.
Bryn, I'm so happy to have this podcast. I've been following your content for over 10 years now. So it's such an honor to be in your podcast. And after that introduction, even I am interested in what I'm going to say. So thank you very much for that.
Awesome. Well, I am excited at what you have to say as well. You are definitely one of the great thought leaders in the industry, and I can't wait to ask you some deep questions on how to get more engagement and some other things around LinkedIn. But before I jump into that, I ask, as you know, all of our guests, what does Making Sales Social mean to you?
What I would say, it's for me, it's as you already said in the introduction, to me, it's a combination of sharing your knowledge, which I call your information capital or your knowledge capital, depending on how you want it, and your social capital. So for me, sales is not... I remember when I started in sales, it was already 20 years ago, a long time ago. And I was working as an account manager, going door to door to talk to people and to ask them if they want to buy my stuff, my goods for a company. And so much has changed, of course, which I don't have to tell you or your listeners. Everybody knows that. So for me, it's a combination of having your network, presenting your network, combining your network, letting them know each other, combining that with your knowledge, with your perspective on the world. And to me, that's what makes this whole industry so super exciting and interesting.
Oh, I love that. I think that's awesome. So let's talk a little bit about what is knowledge capital. Tell me first a little bit, how do you define that? And let's start there.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. It was interesting because this weekend I got an email in from Justin Welsh. He's a famous guy on LinkedIn, of course. And he was talking about how you can create posts. That was not really the point, but what stood out there for me is that he saw a post around personal knowledge management and he didn't know what it was. And that's interesting. Personal knowledge management, it's sort of a new term in the industry, I would say. And it was made famous by Tiago Forte. He has a course called Building a Second Brain. And actually, personal knowledge management goes way back. But the whole premises of it is that we have a lot of information in this world. And in order for us to make sense of that information, we cannot store that in our brains anymore. That's what we all learned at school. Like you have to read a book or you have to read some stuff and then you have to talk about it or understand what it means. But with so much information going on right now, that doesn't really work anymore because it's too much. Our brains can't manage that. So knowledge management is actually, how can you make sense of the information? So first of all, collect the information, store that information somewhere. So for example, ideas you have, but also podcasts that you listen to, books, and all those little snippets of information that are relevant for you. for example, on creating content on LinkedIn or share it with your clients or whatever it is for you. That's actually what that whole system, what that whole phrase means.
I love that. We often similarly call that capturing your genius.
100%.
So yeah, right. When you have an idea, write it down. When you talk with a client and you answer a question, write it down. And nowadays, go on to Zoom and then record those questions and answers to capture it. So I love that you're focused on this. I think it's huge. How do you teach to leverage that knowledge capital? What do you do or how do you teach your clients to now take this knowledge capital and share that thought leadership on social and LinkedIn?
Yeah, so to me, I've been talking about, for example, personal branding, content, networking for a long time. I think that those are the pillars of a good LinkedIn strategy amongst many, of course. But what I often call in my content training is you want to avoid at all cost the blinking cursor syndrome, which is like you go to LinkedIn and then you click on post and then it says, what do you want to talk about? And it's always like, yeah, that actually LinkedIn, that's a pretty good question. For many people, that's hard. So you just told me it was a strategy that came from you, like get a Zoom recording, talk to it, and then take the transcript. I really, really love that one. But that's, for example, one. What you always want is to have a system where you can capture the knowledge, but also manage it. So not only capturing is like part number one. So if you have the capturing of your Zoom transcript from the Zoom account that you just did, or whatever part of content you have, how to manage it, how to find it back. And what I see in the market when it comes to building a second brain, personal knowledge, and all that kinds of stuff, people go crazy. Maybe you've heard of Notion. Evernote, for example, is also a really famous one. Notion is a famous one. But for example, also Obsidian. And depending on what you want, you can go super technical, super detailed with all kinds of text. And well, I don't even understand half of it. But you don't have to do that. For example, I train a lot of corporate clients and they cannot use Notion or Evernote or whatever kind of tool. So all those fancy
is that because their company blocks it? Why can't they use it?
Yeah, exactly. Because the company blocks it. Okay. You know, and sometimes all the tools that I always recommend are 100% safe. But of course, I'm not an IT person, so I understand that you have something with security and stuff like that. But almost everybody can use, for example, Microsoft OneNote, or even use the Notes application on your phone. So there's always a way to capture that information and to reshare it, and that's what I would say, that's the holy grail of this whole personal knowledge management, to connect ideas together. That's like the most important thing.
So I love it. So I use my notes and I have an Apple computer and an iPhone, and my notes sync. So I could be out and about and I've got ideas, and then they're immediately on my desktop or my laptop, and that's great. So I love that advice. I think that's awesome. And you know, and even on that, on your notes, you can click the microphone and talk to it. So even sometimes when I'm driving, I'll actually just talk in my notes about some ideas that are going on, and it doesn't affect anything. It goes through my Bluetooth. So
exactly.
It's pretty
Let me ask you a short question. Do you often use the finding option in Notes? So for example, you have a word, social selling, or whatever it is to you. Do you ever use the option to find notes back?
So I use the, is it Command F, I think, to find.
Or Control F if you have a Windows computer.
Okay. Yeah. And I think, I think that's really important. And I will often categorize like prospecting, content, something that will come up. So I love that you mentioned that. I think
that's like the holy grail. Because capturing your information, that's number one. There are a lot of great tools out there. For example, we were talking about the podcast, and you asked me if I listened to it. And of course, I listened to this podcast from other episodes. The program that I use, or the app that I use, and I think it's also for Android right now, it's definitely for iOS. It's called Snipped. It's like Snip and then with a D. And what you can do, especially when you have AirPods, you can just clip little notes of the episode. So, for example, I was listening to a podcast of you, and you were telling something, and I was like, "This is really interesting." But I was walking in the forest, enjoying the nature. So the only thing that I needed to do is just 2 times click it, and it saved a little audio clip from 30 seconds and the transcript. So that's, for example, one of the things that you can do to find relevant information. Now, what I do then, let's not get too technical, but this might be interesting for you and of course the listeners. What I do then is that it's automatically been sent to Notion, my preferred notes app, and it also has transcript in there. Now, let's say I am doing research for a client, or I want to create new content. Instead of me going to Google, I go to my Notion or whatever tool you use. This also works in OneNote. And I just type in what I want to talk about. And then it finds me, for example, the snippet where you talked about this and this and this in combination with a note that I've taken a year before, and so on. So this is really interesting if you look at it from a knowledge perspective and really managing and finding and organizing your knowledge.
Oh, I love that. That organizational piece is really important, because a lot of us capture and forget. We get it 100%. And then it gets lost and we never use it. So I love that tip. I think that's absolutely brilliant. I'm going to side note this for a second and ask you about what I think is the elephant in the content room, which is ChatGPT. Talk to me about your thoughts around this, how you would leverage it authentically or inauthentically. No, tell me, a little bit about your thoughts around that.
Yeah. So, well, as many people, I was like stunned with ChatGPT. I remember using AI like 1.5 years ago, and I was really like, this is nothing. And then I remember in November, I gave a content session, and I was talking about, I found this pretty nice tool. It's called something OpenAI. You have to create an account and then go here and here and here and blah, 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 blah. But then you had the AI Playground, which was like, I think it was just before ChatGPT. So when it comes to ChatGPT, I think it's an incredible tool. I use it all the time. Let's say that first. But what I think is happening in the world right now is that the perspective that you have on information is getting more and more important. Because what happened is the barrier of creating great content, that's almost, down to zero. You know, if you know a little bit of prompting on ChatGPT, you can create great content. But what it cannot do, at least yet, is
read your mind.
Read your mind. So what I would do when it comes to ChatGPT, play around, do your thing, create content, whatever it is, but always look at it from the perspective that you have, because you are, in that case, of course, unique with your experience, your point of view, the combination. That's why I save all those notes, the combination of different insights. And that's really hard for now to get out of ChatGPT. And of course, we don't know what the future brings, but that's one that I would definitely recommend to everybody. Find out how you can be more clear on the perspective you have on your industry or the business or whatever it is for you.
I love that. How do you feel about people taking all these notes that they're taking in OneNote or Notion or Notes, as I take them, sticking them in ChatGPT and saying, hey, write a 2,000 character blog post based on these notes?
Yep. I was just this weekend. It's finally, I'm from the Netherlands. Some of you might have already heard it on my accent, but finally we have just a little bit. Yeah. But we finally had some great weather. So I was sitting in the sun and I was thinking about, let me do some prompting on ChatGPT. So I am definitely all for it. Capture your notes, capture your ideas. When you're in the car, please keep your eyes on the road, but capture it with your...
Looking to up your LinkedIn game? The Social Sales Link team has you covered with our LinkedIn Sales Accelerator, a guided social selling program that includes training, coaching, and so much more. Visit socialsaleslink.com/in for more details. Again, that's socialsaleslink.com/in.
With your voice note, then put it into ChatGPT, let it write a book, do all that kind of stuff, but then go through it and say like, hey, is this actually what I want to say? And what I see happening is that many people just copy paste, boom, and we have a blog post. Great. But I would say, well, spend some more time and see like, is this really what I want to say? Is this really how I can be serving my audience, my clients with my knowledge the best way?
Yeah, so that's interesting. So that when you do that, you're sharing your voice, not ChatGPT's voice, a little bit more. So I love that idea. The other thing that comes to mind is if you really want to be that thought leader out there, you have to say something that they haven't heard before.
Yep.
And if it's coming from ChatGPT, it's out there.
Yeah.
So your perspective needs to be a new one. So I love
Yep.
that. I based on what you said, that makes so much sense. So I absolutely love this. So now we've got all this content out there. Why are people not sharing it and engaging?
Well, people always get stunned when I say this, but actually it's really dangerous to put content out there and to comment on posts. And what I mean by that is that when you share content, you could get rejection, of course, depending on what you share. Let's keep it professional, but depending on what you do. And for our mammal brains, rejection equals death. And many people don't realize that. Like, it's our instinct that whenever somebody rejects you, your brain detects this is like life threatening. And of course, I'm exaggerating a bit, because if somebody on the street doesn't like you, well, that's way less important than when, for example, your boss or your colleagues or your partner doesn't like you. There's
Right.
a completely different situation, but that's number one. So I would say you have to work a bit more on, if that's the case, work a bit more on your resilience. Because if you share really thought leadership, you also have to take a stand. You have to stand for your opinion. And that means that sometimes you can, of course, in a professional way, but offend people. And I'm not talking about offending people because you want to offend them, but if you have a different opinion, well, somebody could say like, well, maybe I don't agree with you. And great, man, let's have a discussion about it, because we can learn from each other. But that's number one. And number two, I think when you overcome that, it's really hard to keep those ideas flowing and to consistently come up with new angles, new topics. And I see the way myself as well. I talk about the stuff. I have my library full of great content ideas, and still it's hard to create that content. I think there are many different things, but those two will stand out. Like the one that nobody is focused on, nobody notices, because of course nobody thinks like, hey, you don't like my post, and you tell me like, hey, Martijn, I really don't like your post. Sorry, I disagree. You won't die from that, of course, but it's really interesting to see how your mammal brain detects like, oh, people don't like me. Oh, I'm in danger. Yeah.
It's great. Yeah. So when it comes to engaging, I think if they do engage, we get a lot of great posts, good insights. What would you say is a good engagement? What is a good engagement strategy?
Well, that's a good one. First of all, also like really, really strange tip, but I would not go to your home feed.
Me either.
All right, great, Brent. So we agree on that. No, don't go to the home feed, people. Feel free to scroll around, but if you want to leverage LinkedIn, please don't. So I have, and you of course have as well, I follow hashtags. I have bookmarks on specific topics I want to follow. I have those lists with people that I want to follow. I have Sales Navigator, where I have a specific home feed with only news from leads and so on. So many different options. And I completely forgot about your question.
No,
Sorry.
that's okay. But it's, no. And I'm not sure I remember mine either. But it's I guess it's around the engagement strategy, like ringing the bells of people, and then when you see their content show up, like that kind of thing. Look, if you were to say, you're sharing with our listeners maybe the 3 to 5 steps of a good content engagement strategy.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you, and I remember the question. First of all, I would take 2-3 topics max. We most of the times we overcomplicate. Like we want to be known on 15 different topics because then we got a lot of posts in. Often it's way too much. So decide on, well, let's for those of you that cannot choose, let's take 5 max, but I would prefer you to go for 2 or 3 topics that you want to be known for. Go search for those topics on LinkedIn. Just with the search option, see if there are hashtags about it. Maybe you have a specific topic in mind. Maybe ask ChatGPT, like, hey, related to this topic, are there other topics that I could search for? So find the topics that are interesting for you. Then I would say another important one is building your routines. So start engaging with it on a specific time if that works for you. So one of the things that's hard for many people is to stay consistent on LinkedIn. Actually, that's also something I'm always struggling with. But staying consistent on LinkedIn, you can do it in 2 ways. Or it's already in your system, so you do it like you don't have to think about it. But if not, I always say schedule like 5 to 10 minutes a day. If you start with this, start with 5 to 10 minutes a day. Block your calendar. So say, I don't know, after lunch, I'm going to spend 10 minutes on LinkedIn interacting with interesting posts until it's in your system, until you don't have to think about it anymore.
Becomes a habit.
Yeah, it becomes a habit. And why 10 minutes? Because there's no excuse not to do it. We all have 10 minutes in a day. If you make a content strategy, which would take you, for example, 30 minutes a day or an hour a day, definitely 100%, it will bring you lots of results. But you have to do it consistently and you have to do it over a long period of time. And then it becomes really hard if you have to take an hour out of your day. So if you start with 10 minutes and then maybe grow to 20 and 30 and so on, that's way better.
Or even split it up, 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes after lunch, 10 minutes before you leave. And now you've got 30 minutes. Yeah, I love that. I think that's an awesome way to look at that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I played around.
Right. We waste 10 minutes all day long. Like, I don't know how many times I get up to get a cup of coffee. If I'm like, every time I get a cup of coffee, I have to put 10 minutes in on LinkedIn.
But coffee is important, Bryn. Coffee is very important.
I love that. I agree with you. The free LinkedIn homepage is a black hole of time sucker. So from what you're talking about, when you go in, topics, but also people. Who are your prospects? Who's in the industry? And I'm a big fan now of ringing the bell of company pages. You follow them and ring the bell, and of people. So now when you're going to, I tell our clients, spend a lot of time in notifications.
Yep.
If you've rung enough bells, you're getting the content to engage on there. And it's very specific, similar to Sales Navigator, where all you're getting are leads and accounts that you've saved. You can do this a little bit now in the free LinkedIn in a way that you couldn't a few months back. So
and that's a really interesting one that I always recommend people to use, and for those of you that like to spend time in your home feed, by all means do your thing, but try to, for example, I sometimes mute posts. Like, I know that's not interesting for me, I just mute it, but don't count on the homepage to serve you with really great posts, use the tactics that you talked about, of course. Use Sales Navigator, use bookmarks, whatever is relevant for you. Yeah.
Well, one of the other things now, and I think you mentioned this, but I'm just gonna, from a tactical perspective, from the folks listening, is you can search those hashtags and posts of your first degree connection. So you can really drill down in the free LinkedIn. You can really drill down to find the right content to engage on. We're going a little long, but I'm loving this conversation. So I'm just going to quickly ask you, how would you use or recommend using ChatGPT with commenting?
I tried a tool. There was a little plugin that generated like a comment. I didn't like it. What I sometimes do though is I take the posts. So I just copy the whole post. I drop it into ChatGPT. I create a prompt for it, like, hey, ChatGPT, read the text, come up with 2 great angles on me to comment on, blah, 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 blah. What it comes up with is like 80% correct, which most of the times is, but it gives me like an idea of, that's the angle that I want to take. And then I just go to the comment section and I just type it all out. So I don't copy from ChatGPT, but I use ChatGPT to help me come up with different angles. Or for example, I'm talking about like, hey, I want to take the angle of, well, what we talked about, for example, knowledge management. This is what I mean by knowledge management. Please come up with 5 ideas or 3 ideas to comment on this post. But especially with the comment strategy, it has to be authentic. You know, it's the same a little bit with like the LinkedIn bots, you know, great post, great post, great post. Love it, love it, love it. So yeah, when it comes to the content comment strategy, always go for the authentic one. You know, be honest, share your opinion.
Yeah, I appreciate that. All right, as we're kind of coming in for a landing, my last question is there a question I forgot to ask you that you'd like to answer?
Oh, well, there are like tons of apps that I would like to share, but I think we covered already a lot, Bryn. Yeah.
All right, give us your top 3 apps that you haven't mentioned yet.
That's an interesting one. Oh, that's a hard one. I would go for, let me see. I would go for Readwise, Notion, and one that we didn't talk about yet. Then it was Readwise Reader. All right, so let me explain for those of you that are wondering, like, what is he talking about? One of the things that you can do is use an app. It's called Readwise. And they have 2 different sort of plans. Readwise is known for drawing in content from different places. So for example, the podcast app that I just talked about, Snipped, but also, for example, my Amazon Kindle, when I highlight a text in an ebook, it automatically sends it to Notion. So this is what Readwise can do. So it integrates like different kind of apps and sends it all to one central place. For me, that's Notion. Again, this could be any different tool that you want. So that's step number 1. So Readwise, then Notion, of course. Notion is just a website or an app. I think I have almost everything in it. I use it for content creation. I use it for projects. I use it for, well, my knowledge base. I have everything that I read and save comes into Notion. And then what we were talking about before, I use the Finder option. So I'm not really worried about like what's the structure. I have some structure in there, but I really trust on finding interesting information whenever I need to. And then the last one, Readwise now has Readwise Reader. So it's from the same company, but it's a different product. And what that is, it's like a combination of a RSS reader. It's a little bit
it feeds classic. In, it's curating.
Yeah. So an RSS feed. Feedly is an important or a famous one. Google Reader used to be one now, so they have one. But what they do is they also included a bookmarking tool. What they also included is AI. So whenever I save, for example, this is really great. Whenever I save an article, it already makes a summary out of it, and I can just click on it and say, like, what's in this article?
And that's Reader?
Yeah, it's Readwise Reader.
Reader.
Yeah. Readwise Reader.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So those would be the top 3 that I would say, maybe a bit technical, but if you spend a little time on it, it's pretty straightforward, pretty easy to find out how it works.
I love this. So tell our listeners, how can they get a hold of you?
LinkedIn is like the best place. LinkedIn.com, of course. Martijn Holtes, it's with a J, so a little bit. Many people are like, is that like the Dutch version of Martin? So yeah, it is. So Martijn Holtes. So LinkedIn is the best place. I have a website, martijnholtes.com, but it's for now, I'm working on the translation, but it's now, for now, it's all still in Dutch. So LinkedIn would be the place to be. All my content is in English. My profile is, of course, in English. So that will be the most relevant place for people to find me and, follow my content, I would say.
This was great. I'm so glad I got to meet you. We met, I think, because you shared content that I was intrigued by. And so I'm excited how that works, or that's how you came into my world from my perspective. And what you brought here today was really wonderful. So I thank you. So everyone, go follow and connect with Martijn and watch and engage on his content. And so as we close this out, I just want to say to everyone out there, when you are out and about, don't forget to make your sales social.
Thanks for listening, and join us again for more special guest instructors bringing you marketing, sales training, and social selling strategies that will set you apart. Don't forget to subscribe to get the latest episodes from the Making Sales Social podcast. Leave a review down below. Tell us what you think, what you learned, and what you want to hear from us next. You can also listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Play. Visit our website, socialsaleslink.com, for more information.